February 20th, 1945. 10th Mountain Division were pushing north through the northern Italy, but the Germans refused to collapse. What was left of the Wehrmacht clung to every ridge and gorge, trading ground for blood. They couldn't stop the advance, so they started cutting its veins, rail lines, bridges, depots. Night after night, rails were blown, tunnels sealed with dynamite, supply trains shelled from unseen slopes. The mountainous terrain was the biggest problem, and the Germans took advantage of it. In the middle of U.S. supply train, a ragged mix of boxcars, fuel tankers, and a flat car carrying mules, sat something no order ever authorized. A welded-together coffin of angle iron and boilerplate, 6 feet high, with a slotted mantlet for a single Browning M2 HB, 50 caliber. Inside, hunched over the grips in a steel stink of cutting torch and burnt paint, was Private First Class Jack Haller Quinn of the 88th Infantry Division. He was a depot gunner turned tinkerer, the kind of man who fixed things with punches and profanity. He called his contraption the center car, and he'd built it in 3 midnight shifts with a maintenance corporal, a sympathetic Italian railman, and a bribe of 2 cases of Lucky Strikes for the yardmaster at Verona. Command hated it. Rail security was supposed to be guards in cabooses, rifles indoors, not a machine gun nest bolted to a civilian flat car. Hire had already put "remove unauthorized gun position" in a message queue stacked under more urgent matters. Quinn ignored the memo and rolled anyway, because the Germans weren't reading Allied paperwork. They were reading the terrain and the timetable. The ambush started at the horseshoe tunnel above Mori. The engine whistled once, brakes squealed, the whole train slackening as it entered the curve where granite overhangs carved the sky to a knife slit. Then the gorge erupted. Charges blew 3 ties behind the locomotive. Rails popped like piano strings. A small stone viaduct ahead coughed dust, no collapse. Just a scare, but the signal was enough. Shapes edged out of the olive trees and winter brush on the far bank. Squat turrets, low hulls, boxy superstructures with white crosses chalked on side plates. Not Panthers, not even Panzer IVs. Old stuff, but not toys. A. Platoon of Panzer I Ausf. B. With 20mm cannon retrofits. A pair of Panzer II Ausf. C. With 20mm, K 30 and behind them, 4 Panzer Jaeger, with scrounged shields welded around Czech 37 seconds. Thin-skinned, yes, but at 50 yards, over rails, against boxcars? Meat grinders. The German plan was textbook Brenner. Wreck the rails, rake the cars, torch the tankers, grab what doesn't burn. The mistake was not knowing Quinn had put a gun in the train's spine, where the bend gave him a 160-degree field of fire down and across the gorge. He'd sighted it the night before. Chalk marks on rock and bridge parapet, measured with a surveyor's eye he didn't know he had. He'd loaded belts by hand. APIT. AP. Ball. AP repeat, because thin armor hates burning holes more than fat slugs. The conductor's whistle died in the tunnel. Men flattened behind couplers. A German flare popped white and hissed over the gorge. Quinn lifted the Browning's butterflies and snapped his cheek to cold steel. Muzzle rose above the plate slot. "Hold your fire," the brakeman yelled from 2 cars forward. "I am," Quinn said, and pressed the triggers. What happened next took 6 minutes and rewrote 100 years of train doctrine without leaving a single signature on an orders log. The center car's Browning spoke in long, walking streams that stitched across armor built for parades and police duty. Quinn didn't aim at turrets. He aimed at seams, driver slits, and the shallow bowls of engine decks. When a Panzer I tried to edge between poplars, his APIT set something bright under its hatch. When a Panzer II nosed out to angle a shot, he put 4 rounds into the sprocket hub and watched the track peel like a zipper. A Panzerjäger rolled onto ballast to get elevation. He walked the stream along its gun shield and through the narrow rectangle where a loader's elbow flashed. Every tracer that skipped off stone told him where to correct. Every fragment that sparked off plate told him where the steel was thin. Behind him, tankers throbbed with gasoline. In front, a flat car full of mules lay down and refused to panic. The gorge filled with ricochet screams and the hammer roll of one gun in a steel box. German rounds smacked the armor envelope around him, 20 millimeters that thudded. Rifle fire that pinged, a 37 millimeters that rang the whole world like a bell, but the center car held. Quinn did not. He hunted. Quinn emptied the first two belts before the Germans understood what was happening. His fire was deliberate, not hysterical, measured bursts that punched holes where armor was thinnest and sent brittle internal parts flying. The Panzer I's 20 millimeter shield buckled where his APIT hit the vision slit. The driver tumbled out, hands streaming blood. A Panzer II tried to swing across the track to get a better angle. Quinn tracked the sprocket and then the idler, 3 rounds in the hub, and the track peeled off like ribbon. The tank ground to a halt on the ballast, bowing forward as the crew scrambled to change links in the freezing air. They would not change links under fire. A Panzerjäger tried to bring its 37 down the line, but his gun crew was a lawyer's target. No armored bustle, no crew protection, only a box and a man. Quinn put rounds into the shield hinge and into the gun cradle. The recoil system was punctured, the piece locked in recoil, and the crew bailed, boots skidding on oil and snow. A fuel tanker behind a boxcar steamed and then sputtered. Someone had sprayed tracer into its vent, and the thin sheet metal of the car caught like a match. Flames licked across wood and canvas. A single Panzer II, exposed to Quinn's flank fire, blew a transmission after a 20 millimeter round, scored the gearbox, its bow slowly tipped, and it slid into the ditch, engine coughing smoke. The Germans tried to react. An Oberleutnant barked into a field phone and ordered a flanking push through the olive groves. Another crew tried to use a Bergepanther to wrest the disabled vehicles free. But every approach handed Quinn another angle. His center car sat at the train's mass center, and the curve in the gorge gave him an arc that covered crossing approaches. Where their commander expected cover, he found muzzle flashes. Where he expected soft targets, boxcars, tankers, he found a hole in the sky, where 50 cal armor-piercing turned soldier into statistic. 6 minutes is a deceptively short time in combat. In those 6 minutes, Panzer crews made mistakes they would not forgive. They crowded together to shove disabled tanks. They exposed loaders to increase rate of fire. They trooped forward without proper infantry sweeps because the timetable demanded momentum. Quinn punished every one of those errors. He didn't need to stop armor with a single round. He needed to make the armor useless. He shot sprockets, hinges, driveline housings, engine airboxes, small, vulnerable targets that made a tank stop working rather than explode. A tank that can't move, can't retreat under combined fire. Immobilized, it is an oven. The tally before the smoke thinned was ugly. 3 Panzer IIs with stripped tracks, 2 Panzer Is burned through their engine bays after tracer ignited fuel lines, 4 Panzerjäger with seized guns or punctured recoil systems, 2 Bergepanthers chilled and fouled, and a half-dozen tanks stalled by snapped torsion arms or unrepairable gearbox damage. Survivors tried to recover dead hulks. Their effort was piecemeal and public. Quinn's second box of belts ate at them like a file. By the time a German commander sent in a scattered squad of infantry with satchel charges and flamethrowers to clear the flat cars, half the attacking armor was out of the fight, and the rest had backed into the trees to reform. On the hillside above, an Italian railman who'd helped Quinn weld the mantlet spat on his gloves and said, "They expected trains to burn. They did not expect to be hunted." That line made it into later after-action grudges that German staff officers filed away in disbelief. A captured Gefreiter muttered, "The American he fired from a coffin. They called that a train? We called that the center car killer." In regimental signals, back at divisional HQ, German commanders tried to explain the anomaly. Unexpected heavy, small arms fire, originating from inside the train. Precise armor hits, and a pattern of disabling rather than destruction that read like the work of an engineer, not a marksman. Quinn's crew didn't only shoot. They coordinated. The brakeman who'd been shouting at the start now waved the engineer forward in short pushes, timing throttle with fire pauses so the train could inch out of the kill zone while shelling covered the approach. A rifleman on a neighboring boxcar leveled a captured MG-34 through a cracked freight door and pinned a sapper team trying to snake a tow cable under a muzzle of incoming fire. The flat car's makeshift armor took hits and rattled, but its layered plate and the curve of the gorge meant most German shells hit ricochet angles and shaved off shrapnel. The train moved slow, imperfect, blessedly moving. The German column's commander radioed up for immediate air support and for artillery to bracket the gorge, then ordered withdrawal. They could not afford to push a dozen light tanks and tank hunters into what had become a meat grinder. The loss ratio would be catastrophic. Retreat meant losing the opportunity to torch the tankers and wreck the supply. When the smoke settled, the center car's mantlet was peppered with impact craters. The Browning was scorch-stained and bent where a spent 20mm had struck the mount and twanged the barrel. Quinn's hands bled from the recoil. His goggles melted slightly from the heat of sustained fire, and the flat car bore the smell of cordite and diesel. 7 German vehicles were outright destroyed, 4 irrecoverable on site, and 3 more, disabled enough that Berg units towed them back at night at catastrophic risk. All told, the attacking force had lost the equivalent combat power of roughly 15 Panzers when replacements, recovery impossibilities, and burned tankers were factored in. The German commander radioed a terse report that used words like anomaly, train gun, and repeated twice in a note that would later reach Panzer Corps headquarters, outstandingly precise small arms fire. Back in Verona, the yardmaster who'd taken the cigarettes for permit papers sat stone-faced and quiet as official inspectors calculated losses. Higher command scratched heads. Doctrine manuals did not have entries for a rail-mounted Browning that could hunt armor. The war diaries at 10th Mountain and 88th Records later referred to an unauthorized armored center car with bureaucratic disapproval but cheeky gratitude. Supplies arrived. Men lived. Quinn? He filed no report. He took his pay in cigarettes and a slap on the back from his lieutenant. The center car stayed welded to the flat until the next supply run because sometimes the best orders are the ones that show themselves in bullets and not in memos. February 22nd, 1945. 2 days after the Brenner ambush. Snow still clings to the rails where the train limped back to Ala under tow. The armored center car Quinn's coffin sits in a siding, blackened, riddled, half a ton heavier with spent brass. The paint on its side bears a rough chalk scrawl from an anonymous infantryman, "Train Buster." The story spreads faster than the repair crews can scrape soot. An entire German platoon of light armor stopped by a supply train. 15 vehicles lost or crippled in under 10 minutes. It sounds like a joke, a soldier's tall tale from a beer tent. But the wrecks are real, still burning near Mori. German engineers can't salvage half of them before the American artillery zeroes in. Photographs hit divisional HQ tanks with holes no larger than a coin punched clean through the thin armor, the signature of a Browning 50 cal. The impossible confirmed. Command's reaction is predictable. Disbelief, then irritation. Lieutenant Colonel Evans, the rail operations officer, slams the report on his desk. Unauthorized weapon placement, unauthorized engagement, unauthorized engineering. The logistics officer counters. Authorized results. 15 Panzers down. Evans replies, "We're not running gunships on rails. That's lunacy." But lunacy or not, the 88th Division needs every train to reach the front. The German sabotage campaign along the Adige is intensifying. Rail mines under bridges, remote charges in culverts, snipers at switch points. Italian fascist units exa mass irregulars report train movements to the Germans, who set ambushes using captured light armor. The Allies have armor patrols, but they can't cover every bend. The mountain roads are too narrow for Shermans. Only the rails cut through to supply the infantry holding the passes. Trains can't stop. If they stop, they die. That night, in the rail yard at Alla, Quinn sits on the flat car's edge, oiling the Browning. The gun's barrel is warped, the receiver scuffed. He's scavenged a new barrel from an aircraft depot and is filing the mount by lantern light. Sergeant Walt Sisko, the yard engineer, joins him. "They're going to pull it," Sisko says. "Yeah," Quinn replies. "That's what they said about me last week." Sisko snorts. "You're lucky they haven't court-martialed you." "Luck didn't stop 15 Panzers," Quinn says, chambering around and checking the feed. "Steel and stupidity did." By dawn, a new train is ready to depart for Rovereto. Fuel drums, crates of K-rations, replacement mortar rounds. Against orders, Sisko has left the center car coupled in the middle, disguised with tarps and toolboxes. On paper, it's a maintenance flat car. On the inside, it's still a bunker. Quinn climbs in, wrapping his scarf around his face, settling behind the gun. At 0700, the train rolls north. A frozen wind slices through the gorge, carrying the smell of diesel and iron. Above, in the hills near Serravalle, a German armored patrol moves to intercept. Their commander, Oberleutnant Klaus Brandt, has orders to stop all Allied rail movement through the Adige corridor. He has 6 vehicles, 3 Panzer IIs, 2 Panzerjäger, 1 with Czech 37mm guns, and 1 SDKFZ, 222 armored car with a 20mm autocannon. Old machines, but in ambush, they're killers. His plan? Detonate the bridge at milepost 42, trap the train, and rake the cars as they bunch up. But Brandt doesn't know the Americans have already repaired that bridge with steel plate, or that a single armored car rides in the middle, invisible under tarpaulin and dust. He positions his force along the embankment anyway, waiting for the screech of brakes and the easy slaughter that follows. The train whistles once as it approaches, echoing off the canyon. Then the engineer spots the blown signal and throttles down exactly as expected. The German sappers trigger the charge. Nothing happens. The fuse is damp. Brandt curses and waves his gunners forward. They open fire anyway. Tracer arcs from the hills, tearing through the lead cars. One fuel drum bursts, turning the morning white with smoke. Quinn hears the clang, feels the tremor through the rails. He tears away the tarp and swings the Browning around. The armor shield still bears the scars of the first fight. The slot is narrower now, cut with a welding torch. He sees muzzle flashes in the tree line. 3, 4, maybe 5. He doesn't count, he calculates. Range 150 yards. Elevation 10 degrees. Traverse left, 2 mils. He opens fire. The first burst sweeps the embankment, cutting into brush and stone. The second finds metal. A Panzer II's turret jerks sideways, sparks spitting from its mantlet. A third burst cuts into the 222's gun mount. Its 20mm gun folds backward like tin. The Germans scatter, expecting a tank escort. They see only boxcars, then the flash of muzzle fire from the train's middle. Confusion buys seconds. Seconds buy survival. Quinn's bullets stitch up the slope, walking through fog and dust. Every 5 rounds a tracer, every tracer a warning shot that doesn't warn. He changes belts, he's already burned 300 rounds. The German gunners try to relocate, shifting to flank the train. One Panzerjäger drives down the service road to get a side shot. Quinn tracks it, waits until the nose clears the brush, then fires at the exposed track run. The 37mm gun carriage absorbs the hit. The driver doesn't. The vehicle coasts into the ditch, engine idling. Sisko, in the cab, throws the throttle open. The locomotive lurches forward, steel grinding against ice. The train isn't escaping, it's charging through. Quinn keeps firing as the world slides past his vision slot, the scenery a blur of snow and flame. A Panzer II tries to reverse down the road. Quinn hits the radiator. The armor flares white. Coolant turns to steam. Another tank opens fire too late. Its shells spark harmlessly off the train's armored side panels. 6 minutes. Again. 6 minutes. The gorge echoes with a rhythm of gunfire that sounds mechanical, methodical. Then, silence. The Browning smokes, its barrel white-hot. The Germans are gone, 2 tanks burning, one rolled into a ditch, another abandoned by its crew. The SDKFZ 222 lies on its side, tires shredded. The ambush site is a graveyard. Quinn exhales, removes his gloves, and checks the ammo belt. 50 rounds left. Guess, I'm learning efficiency, he mutters. Cisco looks back from the locomotive, eyes wide. You're insane. Quinn grins through the smoke. No, he says. I'm punctual. At HQ, the after-action report lists it as German ambush at Serravalle, repelled with heavy enemy losses. It doesn't mention Quinn. It doesn't mention the armored center car. It doesn't mention the sound that echoed down the valley that morning. A Browning hammering in defiance of doctrine, of orders, of everything war had supposedly learned about trains. February 25th, 1945. The snow in the Adige Valley has begun to melt, but the air still smells of rust and cordite. The trains run again, slow, cautious, loaded with food, ammo, and everything the 10th Mountain Division needs to fight in the Dolomites. Officially, they are protected only by riflemen and a few armored jeeps at the depots. Unofficially, every engineer prays to be assigned the train with the center car. Private Jack Quinn hasn't slept in 2 days. His ears still ring from the last ambush. His hands shake only when they're idle. He's replaced the Browning's cracked barrel again, scrounged a new mount from a wrecked half-track, and bolted an extra steel plate in front of his mantlet, salvaged from a Panzer II hull left burning at Serravalle. The men joke that he's turned the car into a rolling fortress. The Italian workers at Ala call it La Barra d'Acciaio, the steel coffin. The name sticks. At dawn, the next convoy is ready. 12 freight cars, a water tender, 3 flatbeds of fuel drums, and Quinn's armored platform in the middle. Destination: Rovereto, where German artillery has cut off an infantry regiment's resupply route. Orders say proceed with utmost caution. Quinn reads that as, expect hell. He's right. By 0800, German radio intercepts pick up reports of another Allied train moving north. Oberstleutnant Hans Kettering, commander of a rear security battalion near Rovereto, sees an opportunity. His unit has 4 remaining operational vehicles, 2 Panzer II Ausf, Cs, 1 Panzerjäger 1, and a captured French Hotchkiss H-39, pressed into service with a short 37mm gun. Hardly a tank platoon, but enough to kill a supply train. Kettering sets his ambush at the Malga tunnel mouth, where the track emerges into open ground before crossing a small viaduct, perfect for a kill zone. No room to maneuver, no cover, nowhere to run. Quinn's train leaves Ala at 0830, cutting through thawing fog. The gorge is silent, except for the rhythmic clatter of wheels. Halfway to Malga, the conductor pulls the whistle, a single, high note that echoes down the valley. Quinn's head jerks up. Birds explode from the trees to the east. He knows that sound. Silence, after motion. The ambush. The first 37mm shell hits the viaduct ahead of the locomotive, shearing a rail joint and showering the cars with dust. The engineer brakes instinctively, but Quinn yells through the speaking tube, "Don't stop! Throttle up!" The train lurches forward. Another round punches into a fuel flat, igniting 2 drums in a gout of fire. Quinn feels the shockwave through the deck, then swings his Browning to the right. The Panzerjäger sits halfway up the slope, muzzle flash visible between two fir trees. He leads it by a fraction, fires a short burst. Tracers skip across stone. One finds the open cab. The loader jerks backward. The gun goes silent. The Browning's barrel glows red again. The second and third tanks appear to the left, hulls half hidden behind rocks. They fire together 37mm shells, striking the cars in front of Quinn. One ricochets into the center car's armor, denting the plate like a fist. Inside, the air fills with dust. Quinn spits blood from a split lip, pulls the triggers again. The recoil steadies him. He sweeps the line where muzzle flashes bloom. Each burst lasts 3 seconds, enough to walk rounds into the weak spots. The Hotchkiss catches one in its turret ring. Sparks, then flame. The Panzer II behind it tries to reverse, track slipping on wet mud. Quinn fires at the sprocket teeth. Sparks again. The drive chain snaps. The tank shudders to a stop. A German infantry squad moves down the slope with Panzerfausts, hoping to hit the locomotive. Quinn doesn't wait for them to aim. He rakes the embankment with a continuous burst, cutting brush, bark, and bone alike. The Germans dive for cover, one rocket discharging harmlessly into the snow. The Browning's ammunition belt slaps against its can, feeding steadily, a heartbeat of metal. Then a hit. A 20mm round from the last Panzer II tears through the corner of the mantlet, punching a hole the size of a fist and showering Quinn with splinters of hot steel. He blinks blood from his left eye, but doesn't stop firing. He knows if he does, they'll finish the job. He pushes the trigger again. The gun answers. The return burst finds the tank's side plate, thinner than its front. 4 rounds, one after the other. The last one hits the fuel filler cap. The tank erupts, turret blowing free, flipping onto the hillside. Quinn ducks as the blast wave rolls through the gorge, a wall of heat and pressure that shoves the train forward. By 0838, it's over. The Hotchkiss is burning, the Panzerjäger silent, both Panzer IIs crippled or destroyed. The infantry that survives runs back up the hill, leaving weapons behind. Quinn slumps in his seat, gloves smoking, barrel white-hot. The Browning's water jacket refitted from a wrecked aircraft mount hisses like a kettle. The train clears the viaduct and disappears into the Malga tunnel. Inside, darkness and echo. The conductor eases the throttle. "You alive back there?" He calls through the tube. "Define alive," Quinn answers, coughing black smoke. He checks the last belt. 60 rounds left. When the train emerges on the far side, sunlight catches the smoke rising from the gorge. 4 German vehicles lie wrecked, one half submerged in the river. Later, American patrols find shell casings from a .50 caliber embedded in stone 600 meters away. The engineers who inspect the center car find 48 new impact marks on the plate, some so deep the steel has stretched. The after-action report reads simply, "Train reached Roverito 0910, delivered full cargo, engaged enemy armor en route, outcome favorable, no details, no name, no recognition." But that night, Quinn's fellow engineers raise tin cups in the mess and call him the man who turned a supply train into a tank destroyer. The Germans call him something else. Their captured radio intercept, filed under Brenner Strecke incidents, uses 3 words. Geisterschütze, I am Zug, the ghost gunner in the train. From then on, German crews patrolling the Adige line change their tactics. They no longer ambush from close range. They wait for open ground. They send scouts ahead to check if any iron coffin rides in the convoy. And every time a train rolls north, they watch the center cars and wonder which one hides the ghost. March 1st, 1945. The snow line is retreating up the mountains, but the Brenner corridor is still a battlefield. The Germans are pulling back toward Bolzano, leaving wreckage and booby traps behind. Every bridge, every tunnel, Every rail switch has been mined or wired for demolition. The Allies keep the trains moving because the roads are gone, chewed to mud by retreating convoys and bomb craters. Jack Quinn has become a rumor. Officially, he doesn't exist. Unofficially, the train gunner is now a name that both sides whisper. His armored center car has been patched twice, replated with scavenged German steel, and its mantlet reinforced with spare treads from a captured Panzer II. The Browning has eaten 6 barrels and 5,000 rounds since February. It rattles when it cycles now, a death rattle in brass and smoke. The next mission is a supply run to Trento, and it's suicide. The line north of Rovereto passes through the narrowest section of the Adige Gorge, where the river runs black beneath cliffs barely wider than the train itself. 2 tunnels. 3 bridges. No room to maneuver. A perfect trap. At HQ, the engineers brief the crew. Intelligence reports that elements of the 26th Panzer Division are retreating through the area stragglers, but still armed with light tanks and assault guns. One section in particular, led by Hauptmann Erich Nebel, has orders to delay enemy rail movement at all cost. Nebel has 3 Panzer II Osif L. Lux reconnaissance tanks, a pair of Sti KFZ 250 half-tracks with 37 mm guns, and a handful of infantry armed with Panzerfausts. Quinn listens, expression blank. When the briefing ends, the colonel calls him aside. "You know this isn't your fight, son," he says quietly. "You're a depot gunner. You could stay here." Quinn wipes his hands on an oily rag. "Sir, I built the damn thing. It won't shoot straight unless I'm behind it." At 0700 hours, the train rolls out 12 cars, 2 engines, 1 armored center car. The men call it Quinn's Express. The locomotive whistles once as it enters the first tunnel. Inside the steel coffin, Quinn checks his belts, sets his sight, and waits. The ambush begins exactly where everyone expected it would. As the train exits the second tunnel near Nomi, the 1st Panzer II opens fire from the tree line. 20 mm shells spark off the locomotive's tender. The engineer slams the brakes, but Quinn's voice cuts through the speaking tube. "Keep it rolling." He swings the Browning toward the muzzle flash, squeezes the triggers, and rips a burst straight through the brush. The Panzer's return fire stops. The second tank tries to flank from the opposite bank. Quinn traverses, leads, fires 2 bursts, 1 hit. The round slices through the engine deck, white smoke jets out. Then, the half-tracks open up. 37 mm autocannon rounds hammer the flat cars, tearing through crates of rations and fuel drums. The gorge fills with thunder. Quinn keeps firing, working his elevation wheel by instinct. One half-track loses its gunner. The other retreats behind a rock outcrop. But Nebel isn't done. His infantry moves up through the trees with Panzerfausts, aiming for the center of the train. Quinn sees them at the last moment, a cluster of helmets, glints of metal. He switches belts to high-explosive incendiary rounds and sweeps the slope. Fire blossoms among the pines. The rockets never launch. A shell strikes the side of the center car. The impact dents the outer plate and sprays Quinn with hot fragments. He tastes iron. His right ear stops working, but the gun still moves. The feed belt is half gone. He doesn't care. He fires again, this time in short, precise bursts, controlled, surgical. One Panzer looks, edges forward to get a clear line on the locomotive. Its thin armor gleams in the morning sun. Quinn waits. He lets it come closer. Closer, 100 meters, 80, 60. When it crosses the open stretch between the trees, he holds down both triggers. The .50 caliber rounds hit like chisels. They punch through the vision slit. Then the turret ring. The tank stops dead, engine revving, smoke curling from the hatch. The gorge echoes with silence broken only by the ticking of cooling metal. 6 minutes since the first shot. 5 enemy vehicles burning or abandoned. A single gun. 1 man. The engineer finally slows the train near the third bridge. The men in the boxcars crawl out, eyes wide. They've seen what the center car has done. The river below runs black with oil and fuel. A German radio crackles faintly from the far bank, Nebel calling for artillery, for air, for anything. But the lines are cut, and the Allies already control the sky. By afternoon, reconnaissance confirms what Quinn's gun started. The German rearguard is finished. The 26th Panzer's last armored elements south of Trento are gone. The rail line is open. When the train returns that night, engineers count the scars on the armor. 63 impact marks, 12 penetrations, none fatal. The Browning's barrel has turned violet from heat. Quinn climbs out covered in soot, eyes bloodshot. Someone asks him how he kept firing under that barrage. He just shrugs. Train was moving, he says. So was I. At headquarters, a logistics officer tries to write the event into the record, but finds no existing category. The report ends up buried under miscellaneous rail incidents. It notes severe enemy losses due to sustained heavy machine gun fire from Central Flat Car, but omits the shooter's name. The Germans, however, record it differently. A surviving radio log from Nebel's command lists the engagement in clipped, angry lines. Enemy train, central gun position, 50 caliber. Multiple hits, armor ineffective, losses unacceptable. After that, the Wehrmacht issues new orders to all remaining units in northern Italy. Do not engage supply trains at close range. Destroy bridges from a distance. Quinn doesn't hear about it. He's busy rebarreling the gun again, hands steady despite the tremor that never leaves his right one. He doesn't think of himself as a hero. He just knows the next train leaves at dawn and someone has to ride the center car.